Very nice to speak to you, Matt. You're down in London, yes?
That's right, yep, South East London, in Hither Green, part of Lewisham Borough.
Right, okay, but you're not from there, of course, are you? You're originally from our part of the world?
That's right, yeah, from Matlock in Derbyshire.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, though, on the Chandlers, on my dad's side, we are from South East London. So I'm living, and I only found this out after we bought the house, because we bought our house in 2011. But I actually live on the same road that my great aunt Phyllis used to live on in the 30s. And when I told Auntie Christine that I'm living on George Lane, she was like, "No way! That's where my aunt Phyllis used to live." You know. Yeah, no, it's really weird. And like when I started coming down here 20 years ago, my best mate Tom, who was also from Matlock, his first house was on Shardlows Road, which is where my grandparents used to live in the 80s. So you know, it's kind of, I think it just shows you that South East London's actually quite small, really. You know, these things will happen as you know, as crazy as they are.
South East London, centre of the universe. So how did you get started playing the guitar?
I started at the age of 11, and my older brother Simon, he was bought for his 16th birthday a Fender Strat, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And I kind of played, much to his annoyance, I played it more than him, or you know, tinkered about with it. And then he ended up buying me my first guitar about a year later, which was this metallic purple Hondo 2 Strat, which I absolutely loved. It's a proper, you know, like glam rock guitar. It's like metallic purple with a black scratch plate. And so I noodled about on that for ages. And then a few years after that, I started having lessons with Fred Baker Senior, not Fred Baker, the superb guitar bass player tutor at Birmingham Conservatoire, but his dad, who was running lessons from a place in Chesterfield. And then, that's it really. Then, you know, you just carried on learning, and I'm still learning. So, you know, it just goes on.
Yeah. So I mean, who were the guitarists or the musicians in general that inspired you when you first started?
So it started out with being into heavy metal, and so being influenced by Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, Marty Friedman from Megadeth, and Hendrix and Angus Young, and you know, any guitar player really that had a distorted heavy tone. But then in 1994, I think it was, a friend of mine played me Letters from Home, Pat Metheny group, and that was it. And then it was like, that's the thing that I really want to do. Because also at the same time, we were getting into programming, and dance music was, we were 94. I think I was around 16 years old, I think 17. And dance music was becoming quite a thing. I also got into that, but then I had a hard time with trying to work out whether mixing the kind of guitar playing that I liked, the rock Satriani type thing that I was into, how was that going to lend itself very well with the beats that I was making on the Atari ST. So when I heard Pat Metheny, it was like, that's it. Because that sound would actually be so much more suitable for that overall sound, electronic music sound. So I really, really got into Pat Metheny, and I was into him for years. And I started, doing some like chromatic lines in the same way, which is what I thought he was doing, thinking, I was really, this is it. I'm a jazz guitar player now. And it was only until I went to Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts in 1997, where the guitar teacher there, a really great guitar player called Jill Halstead, she said, you need to look at improvisation over chord changes if you're into Pat Metheny. And so so started this sort of journey into learning tunes from the real book and analysing what was going on and learning about arpeggios being the basis of what you really do as an improvising guitar player. So yeah, it's funny really, because it goes from kind of listening to Iron Maiden and like to then a year later you're listening to Dexter Gordon, and you don't even think you can't even stand the thought of actually listening to Maiden anymore. It's got to be straight ahead bebop. It's got to be Stan Getz and Coltrane and whoever else. Yeah.
I mean, the funny thing with Metheny, though, is that although a lot of the time he uses a very clean sort of sound, on some of his work, he can go quite wild. I mean, he's worked with Ornette Coleman, and he's even done stuff with Derek Bailey, and
yeah,
there's a lot more to him than I think the casual listener would.
No, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you moved down to London.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was always the thing that people used to say about, in furthering your career. Was it really a necessary thing to move to London?
I don't know, Bob, to be honest. There's a lot of advantages in here, in the sense that you've got easier access to a lot of places to play. Logistically, because when I was living in Matlock, if I wanted to go to anywhere for a gig, it would be at least a 40-minute drive into Nottingham or wherever, whereas now it's more like just hop on the train and you're there. There's a lot of players here as well, and it does seem to be wherever. I mean, here in Hither Green, there's quite a lot of really good bass players, and there's a few drummers, and I'm sure a lot that I haven't even met yet. I've just discovered that there's a really, really good guitar player who lives just around the corner from me, a chap called Lee Blackmore, who was at Birmingham Conservatoire at the same time Matt Ratcliffe was. And he's just around the corner. I've only just found this out. I've been here coming up to 10 years now, and it's just like he's there. That sort of thing wouldn't be in Matlock. You wouldn't have that. But then it does tend to be. It just strikes me now that jazz is a much more nationwide scene. There's a lot of. Most of my contemporaries are actually sort of doing more and more gigs regionally than they are actually in town. There's Ronnie's, of course, and they're regulars at Ronnie's, the Upstairs Bar and the 606 and whatnot. But you kind of hear more about them travelling up to Oxford for a gig, or to playing at the Bonington or whatever, than you do about, you know, playing somewhere in Shoreditch or in Ealing or whatever. So I think, I don't know, I think maybe sort of 20, 30 years ago, it might have been a bit better, but I just think now it's the whole landscape's changed. So it's more of a nationwide thing. I think, you know, if there is anybody watching this that is thinking about coming to London to do that, I wouldn't advise them to do it. And I think actually, I remember Tony Kofi saying to me ages ago, you know, you don't need to live in London now to really, you don't need it. You know, it's a nationwide thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I know that a number of musicians seem to have moved out of London. I know, like Phil Robson, for example. I think he and Christian, they moved to Margate initially. Or I think it was Margate. And then New York, of course.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But I mean, you've got people like Leanne Carroll who lives in Hastings, and I think what you're saying about having a more national scene is true as well. I think in places like Manchester and up in Scotland, of course, there are some quite sort of thriving scenes. And again, perhaps with the availability of technology and what we're finding now with the whole lockdown thing, is that people are sort of communicating over the internet, whereas perhaps they might have had to get together in the past, you know?
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
And I mean, possibly the expense of living in London is another thing that might deter people.
Well, there is that, but it is doable. I mean, you know, there are people make it work. You know, I think. I mean, I know a lot of singers that, you know, they're you know, people get by living in shared houses, and you know, it's. I think if you're gonna maybe start a family and also try and be a jazz musician, it might not necessarily work, but I don't know.
There was that wonderful quote from Frank Zappa, "Jazz, the music of unemployment," which maybe a bit tongue-in-cheek. And he also said, "Jazz is not dead, it just smells funny." But I mean, this brings up the idea of not just pursuing one thing. I mean, presumably you've got, obviously, you've got the trio with Ross Stanley, the Astrometrics trio on the go.
Yeah.
But there must be a lot of other things that you're involved with.
Yeah, so I'm doing. I'm in a project with a singer called Monica Lidker, and she's just done a crowdfunding campaign which was successful. So she's I think she's just sent an email over this morning to say that she's ordered the vinyl record. She's having a vinyl record made. So she's ordered that this morning. So that's, I'm not sure when the official release for that is, but that project's been going on for a few years now. The album itself was actually recorded in 2018. And there's a lot of other musicians involved in that as well, including Maciek Pesh, Polish guitar player, and Christian Boring, Danish guitar player, very good. But both of them superb players. We're not on the same tracks. They've been recorded at different times in different places. But they're all, I think there's like 21 musicians or something. Shez Raj is on it playing bass. Adam Teixeira on drums, and then there's a lot of Polish musicians from when she went out to Poland to record out there. So there's that. There is, what else? Oh, there's Pest, my electronic band. So we were signed to Ninja Tune Records back in, got signed in 2001, and our last release came out in 2005, and we've done a few gigs here and there, but life's kind of got in the way in terms of that project. We've always kind of met up, because we're really good mates, you know. We've always met up to write tunes together and record, but nothing, and the occasional gig, but nothing major is going on. One of us lives out in Japan now. He had a Japanese wife, so he's gone out there. I think they're coming back next year, but it's uncertain. We don't know. You know, we've got a bet on is Tom going to stay out there or not? And another one of us, Ben, has moved to Bristol. So because when lockdown came, we all agreed to record a new album remotely, which is what we've been doing over the last sort of month or so. And I just think the idea is that we're just going to, get it done, and then we're just going to punt it around and try and get it signed to a label. Like, are you familiar with a band called Noah?
Yes, the duo. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to try and get it, see if their label would be interested in it.
To Canada, where the people ain't afraid of ya. They talk French when they say to ya, et toi touche pas à mes gosca. Back to Canada, where the people ain't afraid of ya. They talk French when they say to ya, et toi touche pas à mes gosca.
And then, other than that, I've just been getting into a lot of composition. So a few years ago, I did the music for a radio show on BBC Radio 4 called The Curious Cases of Rutherford and Fry. So it's like a scientific sleuth thing. The public write in with questions. Where does red hair come from? Why is my husband blonde and I'm brunette? Why has my child got red hair? So they investigate why that is, blah, blah, blah. So on the back of that, the producers at BBC Sounds got in touch and asked me to do the music for a podcast called Bad People, which has just come out. So I've been busy doing that, which I'm very hoping that that's going to continue and there's going to be more, and I can maybe sort of give up teaching guitar and just stay at home and write tunes for podcasts. That'd be great.
So you do a bit of teaching as well?
Yeah. So during lockdown, I did the Skype, Zoom sessions, but then before then, I was really busy peripatetic teacher for in schools in Bromley.
Right.
So a lot of children, 48 kids a week. It's I don't want to think about it actually. It's going to start again in September. So
obviously not much is happening in terms of live gigs at the moment, but in normal times, what would you say would be a typical gig for Matt Chandler? Is there a typical gig for Matt Chandler?
I don't think there is, Bob, to be honest. A typical gig. Oh, wow. Well, it'll be with the organ trio. That I think that's the one that I've gigged the most with. Monica Lidka was pretty busy actually. We did a lot of places like Jazz Cafe Posk, and then we also went up to places like Durham for a gig up there. But then with the trio, I mean, we did places like the Spin Jazz Club. That was a good gig. the Bear Club in Luton just before it closed, because that's gone now, sadly. And then last year we did Jazz Ahead in Bremen. That was really good. And then the month before that, we did a 6-day tour of Sweden. So we were in Stockholm and Göteborg, and then all the way down to the south in a place that I can't remember the name of at the moment. Yeah. Something like I don't even want to try and hazard a guess what it was called. South Sweden. So I don't know, a typical gig, I don't know. Just, I suppose, like places like the Spin, I guess, Peggy's.
Of course, yeah, you were at Peggy's Skylight in Nottingham, weren't you?
Peggy's Skylight, yeah, that's right, yeah. So places like that, I guess, yeah.
Probably more than other instrumentalists. I think guitar players tend to have more than one guitar and get into the gear thing to some degree. Obviously, not all players do. So, I mean, what do you like to use? Do you have a favorite guitar, or do you sort of say, right, for this particular situation, I'm going to use this instrument, and for that situation, I'll use another one?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. I mean, my collection's quite limited. Would you like to see?
Yeah, go on.
So I've got my warm-off Strat.
Yeah.
So this one I'd use for Monica Lidka or Pest, or if I get any wedding gigs or anything, it would be this one. Just because it's, you get a nice jazzy tone out of it, but then for the rock side of things, it's good. And it also, the Strat tonally lends itself better to effects pedals, really. It's got more brightness, so the pedals, the delays and the synths and things. So that's that one. But then for the trio, I'd use my case. So this is essentially it's just the same as a Gibson 175, but it's made by John Case at Case Guitars, and it's got this offset design. But because you see here, there's more of a, it droops down this way more. It adds a little bit of weight to the guitar this way. So when you stand with it, it's actually a lot more comfortable than an actual Gibson 175.
Right.
So it's a very comfortable guitar, yeah. So this is what I use for the trio. But then sometimes, I'm kind of, I haven't told my partner yet, but I'm saving for like a 335.
Yeah.
Because a lot of what I remember about before lockdown, particularly, at gigs like at the Spin in Oxford, you go to work in the day, you pick your kid up from school, you wait for your partner to get home, and then you've got to get in a car and go. You haven't got any time to warm up. And the case guitar or anything, for me personally, anything that has this kind of 3-inch thickness, you've got to warm up on it a little bit before you play. And a lot of gigs, you haven't really got the time to do that. You've got a 3-hour drive to do, and you get there with half an hour to go, and it's like, oh my God, right, get set up, right, go, bang. So I just think for gigs where, if I know I haven't really got the time to warm up, it'd be nice to just have something like a 335 that gives me the punch that the case guitar does, but that isn't going to kind of hold me back too much.
Do you use many pedals?
Yeah, I mean, I've got...
You don't need to show them.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's going to be quite difficult. It's delays, distortion, and then synths. So things like the EHX Hog, hexaphonic octave generator. And then it's called a super electroharmonic super ego, which is a granular synth. And what that does is it takes a grain of the sand and it loops it infinity times, so you can play a chord and it will hold the chord there, and you can then play over the top of it. It's Kurt Rosenwinkel uses one. Loads of modern players use them actually, so it's not a very original thing anymore. And that's about it, actually.
Talking about gear then brings us on to the piece that you've recorded especially for Inspire, because it's not just one of you, it's 4 of you. So could you perhaps talk us through how you recorded that?
Right. So basically, it started with the rhythm guitar part on the Strat, and I basically just recorded that straight into Logic with a metronome. It's not too difficult to do when you're just doing that, but the only difficulty with it is that you just have to keep in mind how many times you've gone over, you've played through the chart, because you've got to bear in mind your solos, and for me, because a lot of guys are doing this, particularly now with lockdown. So I don't know whether this would happen to them, but for me, sometimes I'll get to a point in the track and I think, hang on a minute, how many times have I played this now? And then, so you've basically got to keep track of how many times you've done it. But then as soon as you've got that, then you just then overdub the rest of it. And all the while you're doing that, for each take that you do, you record yourself doing it on your smartphone. And then when you've got all your tracks ready, you then put it into Final Cut Pro and sort it out that way. Now, in terms of Final Cut Pro, though, I didn't do that. So over lockdown, I came into contact with a really great Russian guitarist called Vadim Karchenko, who I did a remote session with, and that's up on Instagram. And he's got Final Cut Pro. So I basically sent all of the video footage and the audio to him, and he put it together for me and then sent it back as a thing.
Does it have a title?
That tune, well, it's actually it's called El Diablo,
right? And
it's off the Astrometrics album.
Right.
It's people are going to hear it, and those that are into Pat Martino are going to say, "That's El Hombre by Pat Martino. That's the same chords." Yes, it is the same chords, and that's why it's called El Diablo, because El Hombre by Pat Martino, it's one of my favourite tunes, and it's a chord sequence that I really, really like playing on. And when you consider that you can't copyright chord sequences, I just thought there's nothing wrong with, taking it. I think they actually call it a contrafract, don't they? When you take the same chords and you put a different melody on top.
Yeah.
But the thing is that but those particular chords on El Diablo are slightly different. There's some different changes in there, so it's not exactly the same as El Hombre, but it's called El Diablo because it tilts its hat to El Hombre.